Bold, innovative, and unconventional, a television series that turned its own franchise upside down, settling disputes and subverting expectations. This is the story of a Starship-based enterprise on a 5-year mission to create a 5th broadcast television network. Hi, I'm Dan Larson, and this is the history of Star Trek Voyager. Star Trek Voyager is a syndicated television series that ran 172 episodes over 7 seasons from January of 1995 to May of 2001. It is a continuation of the Star Trek franchise that began in 1966. It was the 4th live-action series, or 5th series overall, if you count the animated series from 1973, the first one featuring a flagship ship not named Enterprise. Unhappy with a new treaty, Federation colonists along the Cardassian border have banded together, calling themselves the Maquis. They continue to fight the Cardassians. Some consider them heroes, but to the governments of the Federation and Cardassia, they are outlaws. True to their outlaw label, in an attempt to escape capture by a Cardassian ship, the Maquis pilot their craft into a notorious plasma storm called the Badlands. Their gambit works as the Cardassian ship is disabled, facilitating their escape. However, the Maquis ship is then overcome by an unexpected displacement wave. After the Maquis ship disappeared, the Federation starship Voyager is dispatched to find it. Voyager is the fastest ship in the shipping business. At the helm is Captain Catherine Janeway, who is particularly concerned about her chief of security, the Vulcan Tuvok, who is undercover on the Maquis ship. Inevitably, Voyager must enter the same plasma storm that the Maquis was in when it disappeared, allowing Voyager to also be overcome by the same displacement wave, resulting in Voyager being transported to the same place the Maquis was transported to, 75,000 light-years across the galaxy into the unexplored Delta Quadrant. Unexplored because it's so far away. Basic math tells the crew of the Voyager that even at sustained maximum speeds, it would take roughly 75 years to get home. The former Federation officers of the Maquis ship and the current Federation officers of the Voyager quickly put their now irrelevant territorial disputes aside. They merge forces to help each other survive the known and unknown threats they will encounter on the journey home. Alone in an uncharted part of the galaxy, there's another entity out there that can get them home, but in the meantime, they'll be looking for wormholes, spatial rifts, or new technologies to help. Somewhere along the journey, they'll find a way back as a united crew of Voyager. Thank you to Magic Spoon for sponsoring this video. Click the link in the description below and use code TOYGALAXY for $5 off your order today. Hard to believe I'll be 50 years old someday. Whether or not I'm ready to deal with that, I've definitely noticed a few things that suggest I'm not the same kid I was a few years ago. How I exercise has changed, how I dress has changed, and how I eat has changed. Alright, how I dress hasn't changed that much, but I'm definitely more aware of what I eat and how it affects how I feel. Magic Spoon can help you eat like the adult you're supposed to be while acting like the same kid you've always been. Because Magic Spoon cereal comes in the same flavors I loved as a kid, like cocoa, frosted, peanut butter, and my favorite, fruity. Magic Spoon cereal has 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, and only 4 to 5 net grams of carbs in each serving. It's keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, and soy-free. All Magic Spoon products are backed with a 100% happiness guarantee, so if you don't like them for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Magic Spoon also ships to Canada and the UK. You can also find Magic Spoon on Amazon or in your nearest grocery store. So click the link below or scan the QR code on the screen to try Magic Spoon treats or granola today and use the code TOYGALAXY for $5 off, or go to magicspoon.com/TOYGALAXY to save $5 off your order today. And thanks again to Magic Spoon. Star Trek was created by Gene Roddenberry and first aired on television in 1966. 79 episodes over 3 seasons aired before it was canceled in 1969, though most of the cast and many of the writers returned in 1973 for the continuing adventures of the Enterprise on Saturday mornings. Produced by Filmation, 22 episodes aired over 2 seasons into 1974 before the franchise once again went quiet. Over the next decade, the original series was rerun in syndication, introducing the Enterprise to a whole new generation of science fiction and television fans. In 1987, the next generation of Star Trek fans got their own new Star Trek series called Star Trek: The Next Generation. Set roughly 100 years after the original series, it continues the original mission to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no one has gone before. Which it did for 178 episodes over 7 seasons from 1987 to 1994, and then, like the original series before it, graduated to feature films with Star Trek Generations in 1994, officially passing the baton of franchise leadership from Captain Kirk to Captain Jean-Luc Picard. The baton of franchise leadership on television was passed from Jean-Luc Picard to Commander Benjamin Sisko on Star Trek Deep Space Nine, beginning in January of 1993. The first Star Trek series that didn't go anywhere, literally because it was set on a space station instead of a spaceship. For 1 year in 1993, Next Generation and Deep Space Nine aired concurrently. The first time more than one Star Trek series aired at a time, and the first time more than one series was telling stories about the Star Trek universe at the same time. When Next Generation ended in 1994, producer Paramount Television was looking for a way to carry its legacy over to another series to air concurrently with Deep Space Nine. More importantly, between Next Generation, the Next Generation films, and Deep Space Nine, Star Trek was at the height of its popularity, a media juggernaut seemingly still on the way up. Paramount hoped to use that momentum to finally establish their own television network. See, all the way back in 1948, at the dawn of television networks, Paramount attempted to establish another broadcast television network alongside ABC, CBS, and NBC. Without getting too deeply into the history of Paramount Television Network, it failed for various antitrust reasons. Paramount tried again in 1978 with the Paramount Television Service, this time using the popularity of Star Trek as a built-in pre-existing audience to carry them through the launch. Intended to broadcast one night a week on Saturdays, it would have launched with Star Trek Phase 2, the sequel series to the original 1966 series. Unable to sell enough advertising to cover the venture, plans for the new network were scrapped, and the development of Phase 2 was repurposed as Star Trek the Motion Picture, released in 1979. Fox beat Paramount to the punch in 1986 when they successfully created the fourth major network alongside ABC, CBS, and NBC on the back of shows like Married with Children. Actually, that was it. But the dream of a Paramount network never went away. Through the 80s and into the 90s, Paramount expanded their portfolio of syndicated television series that weren't associated with Star Trek. Shows like Entertainment Tonight, The Arsenio Hall Show, and Friday the 13th, the series. Into the 90s, as more markets were able to access cable television, the broadcast television audience began to shrink. Independent stations began to seek the security of network affiliation. In 1991, Paramount entered the fifth network race when they bought Six Station, rebranding them the Paramount Stations Group. Follow me here because this part gets a little muddy. At the same time, in January of 1993, Time Warner and Chris Craft Industries entered the race to create a fifth network called the Primetime Entertainment Network, or PTEN. The plan, for the most part, was for PTEN to broadcast on Fox-affiliated stations during hours when Fox wasn't broadcasting. 3 months later, in April of 1993, the FCC voted to end the Financial Interest and Syndication Rules, or FinCIN, that were put in place in 1970. The rules essentially prohibited networks from owning the shows they broadcast in primetime and syndication as a way of preventing the monopolization of the airwaves. Ending the FinCIN rules set the stage for a Paramount network whose main source of revenue would be their flagship franchise, a franchise they owned, Star Trek. And not for nothing, Paramount was concerned that if networks could start making their own shows, they would have no incentive to buy from studios like Paramount. If Paramount had their own network, they could guarantee that their shows would air. In September of 1993, Viacom announced that they were merging with Paramount. In October, Chris Craft Industries, who were part owners of PTEN, announced that they were leaving PTEN to instead partner with Viacom to create a new network alongside ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox called United Paramount Network, or UPN. But wait, there's more! A month later in November, Time Warner, the other half of PTEN, and Tribune Broadcasting announced that they too were starting a new network called the WB. If it seems like that's too many new networks and that they might cannibalize each other competing for the same audience, you are spoiling the end of this video. Before we get to that, the UPN launched on January 16, 1995 with the 2-hour premiere of Star Trek Voyager. And Voyager, after all, is what this video is all about.
Get ready to go beyond too far. Prepare for a journey into the farthest reaches of the galaxy and your imagination. Star Trek Voyager. Coming to Earth. Coming to UPN.
Premiering Monday at 8 on TV 50.
The genesis of Voyager goes back to 1993 and the imminent launch of UPN as Deep Space Nine was entering its second season and Next Generation was entering its seventh and final. Instead of returning to one Trek series on television and one in the theaters, Paramount wanted to stick with 2 on television and 1 in theaters. Executives at UPN pressured Star Trek producers to develop a brand new series. Rick Berman was an executive producer on Next Generation and co-creator and executive producer of Deep Space Nine. He was one of Gene Roddenberry's hand-picked stewards of the franchise after he relinquished control. Berman needed something that would maintain the spirit of Star Trek, but also do something different with it. Together with fellow producers Michael Piller and Jerry Taylor, they attempted to create something that would attract new interest while retaining longtime fans. After Deep Space Nine was set on a space station, it made sense to go back to a series set on a ship exploring the galaxy. But they needed a new dynamic, a new reason to be out in the stars, something that broke free from the expectations about how a Star Trek series functioned. Every series prior to Voyager had the relative safety and security of the Federation of Planets. No matter how bad things got, Kirk, Picard, Sisko all knew that the Federation fleet was just a phone call away. Voyager turned the mission of the series around 180 degrees. Star Trek had always been about seeking new life out there among the stars. What if Voyager was already out there among the stars and the mission was to get back home? According to Pillar, the idea grew out of episodes of previous series. Next Generation had several episodes where advanced beings like Q chucked the Enterprise way out of the range its engines could have propelled it, but by the end of the episodes, they found their way home. They wondered, what if it didn't? Even after an episode, even after a season, Voyager would be able to tell stories that other Star Trek series couldn't. Stories about dwindling resources, how to make repairs when there's no one around to call for help, how the crew deals with the possibility of never returning home. Furthermore, the crew of both Enterprise and Deep Space Nine were, for the most part, crews that were all there for the same reason and in the service of the Federation. While each series did a little to create tension between characters, races, and political philosophies, Voyager pushed that to its limit. Voyager forced the Federation to rely on the very rebels they pursued just a few days earlier.
A band of Starfleet renegades threatens to sabotage the peace.
Do you deny that the Federation is engaging in organized terrorist activities
and spark an explosive conflict?
With the long run-up to the series, Berman and crew were able to develop the plot lines that would impact Voyager, that would smooth the transition to the new series during Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. The Maquis as a concept, a rebel faction fighting against the Federation and the Cardassians, were first introduced in a two-part episode of Deep Space Nine in April of 1994 called The Maquis. From the technical side, Voyager relied far more on computer-generated imagery than previous series had. Nearly every exterior shot of the ship used digital versions of the spacecraft rather than physical models. And, for the first time in the franchise, put a female captain at the center of those adventures in direct defiance of their target demographic, the 18 to 49-year-old men who Paramount considered Star Trek loyalists. The 18 to 49-year-old men who could imagine themselves in the uniform of Kirk, Picard, and Sisko, but might have trouble accepting the authority of Catherine Janeway. Voyager co-creator Jerry Taylor admitted that it was difficult to come up with characters that were new to Star Trek. For a franchise that was nearly 30 years old, nearly every archetype had been explored at some point in one of the previous 4 series and 7 feature films. Each time they felt like they had something, they realized that something already existed. They struggled to find a balance between the familiar and the unknown, and that started at the top with the captain of the ship. French-Canadian Oscar nominee Genevieve Bujold was originally cast as Captain Elizabeth Janeway. Despite an abundance of stage and feature film experience, she had done very little television and nothing on the scale of Star Trek. The physical, mental, and emotional demand of the shooting schedule proved to be too much. Just 2 days into shooting the pilot episode, she left, leaving the production scrambling to find her replacement. Fortunately, Kate Mulgrew had already been in the running for the role. Mulgrew had been acting on television since 1975's The Wide World of Mystery. She spent 3 years on the soap opera Ryan's Hope and 1 season as Mrs. Columbo on NBC's Columbo spin-off series, Mrs. Columbo. Through the 80s and into the 90s, she made appearances on St. Elsewhere, Cheers, Murder, She Wrote, Murphy Brown, and even did voices on shows like Batman the Animated Series and Pirates of Dark Water. To further take ownership of the starship captain, Mulgrew suggested renaming the character from Elizabeth Janeway to Catherine Janeway. Other Federation crew members included Tim Russ as Security Chief Tuvok, the first Black Vulcan to appear in any Star Trek series. Robert Duncan McNeil played hotshot pilot Tom Paris. Garrett Wang played Operations Officer Harry Kim. Robert Picardo played the Doctor, a holographic medical program that starts off as a short-term solution to the death of the medical staff, but over time develops self-awareness. The Maquis are led by Robert Beltran as Chakotay, a former Starfleet officer, Roxana Dawson as B'Elanna Torres, a half-human, half-Klingon who attended Starfleet Academy. Ethan Phillips is Neelix, a consultant, if you will, on all matters related to his home, that is, the Delta Quadrant. Jennifer Lean is Kes, an Ocampan refugee with telepathic powers and also Neelix's girlfriend. And a late addition to the cast that ended up being one of the defining characters of the series, Jerry Ryan as Seven of Nine. She joined in the first episode of Season 4 in September of 1997, echoing the journey home of the Voyager itself as a fully assimilated Borg endeavoring to regain her humanity.
Welcome to the first night of the first network for the next century, UPN.
Star Trek Voyager premiered January 16, 1995 with the 2-hour episode that also acted as the kickoff for the UPN network. Ratings were strong out of the gate, but tapered off as the series ran its course, a downward trend that continued for the duration of the series. At least in part because executives at UPN did what executives do: meddle. Instead of letting the creatives do what the creatives do, create. Interference from above resulted in the softening of edges that the creators of the series intentionally introduced as the core elements of the story. Co-creator Michael Piller characterized the guidance from above as an attempt to make Voyager into next-generation light in hopes of retaining next-generation ratings. As a result, there were few ongoing story arcs. The conflict between the Maquis and the Federation faded into the past. At one point, they even considered just getting the Voyager back home as soon as possible so the series could get back to an episodic formula that executives were more comfortable with. The addition of 7 of 9 in Season 4 charted a new course for the series, changing up the status quo and, for some, re-energizing their interest altogether. And not for nothing, but borrowing from the success of Next Generation, who introduced the Borg to the franchise, 7 of 9 echoed the Borg Queen from First Contact, which hit theaters just 6 months earlier. Some credit 7 of 9's addition to the cast as saving the show from cancellation, but data shows the ratings didn't really change that much. The real impact was in the public awareness of the show, thanks to the sci-fi sexiness of the character design, especially when contrasted against Captain Janeway. Which was a problem for Kate Mulgrew, not because she was intimidated in any way by Jerry Ryan or the perceived sexiness of the character, but because the focus moved away from Captain Janeway, something that Mulgrew resented more and more as she saw it as a break from Star Trek tradition, where the captain was the driving force of the series. Like Deep Space Nine before it, Voyager got an original theme song. Like The Next Generation, it was composed by Jerry Goldsmith. The theme song was released on CD, first as part of the soundtrack of the pilot episode, and then as a single with 3 different versions, both in 1995. There was a mountain of licensed merchandise and an extensive line of toys from Playmates that complemented the existing line of Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and original series action figures. The last new episode of Voyager aired May 23, 2001. That said, in 1999, Viacom completed its buyout of Chris Kraft, leaving Viacom as the sole owner of UPN. However, UPN was in a dire financial situation. By 2000, UPN had already burned through roughly $800 million on shows that were all failures, the few exceptions being Moesha, Sentinel, and Star Trek Voyager. UPN hobbled along for another 5 years before it merged with Warner Brothers and Tribune Broadcasting's WB network, and the whole thing was rebranded The CW. It took a while, but several characters from Voyager have found their way back into the world of Star Trek in the decades that followed the series, most notably Jerry Ryan's 7 of 9 in 2020 as part of the cast of Star Trek Picard, furthermore reuniting her with Tim Russ's Tuvok, now a Starfleet captain himself. And Mulgrew's Captain Janeway as Admiral Janeway in 2002's Star Trek Nemesis, and the animated series Star Trek Prodigy in 2021, ironically a launch series for the new Paramount Plus streaming network.
And to be able to play the first female captain, and to be able to endow her with the kind of humanity and levity and sensitivity that was crucial to the success for me of this role was a great joy to me. Great. People often say to me, oh, well, now you're typecast, you know, it's done. You're Captain Janeway. And I say, really, if that were the reality, I wouldn't be so shameful, would it? She was a great character. I was very, very honored, very blessed to play her. And I'd do it again. I loved that chapter. I loved it.
Voyager's legacy is all about subverting expectations, relishing in the incredible future imagined by Star Trek since the beginning. It pushed harder than every previous series to make sure that future included a diverse spectrum of voices and representation. Ian Gray, writing for RogerEbert.com, said, quote, Voyager offered American audiences something never seen before or since, a series whose lead female character's agency and authority were the show. It was a rare, heavy hardware science fiction fantasy not built around a strong man, and more audaciously, it didn't seem to trouble itself over how fans would receive this. On Voyager, female authority was assumed and unquestioned. Women conveyed sexual power without shame and anger without guilt. An uncommon crew of unexpected heroes who completed their mission of launching a new Paramount network in our world and finally returning home to Earth in their world. Individuals who learned to survive the worst fate could throw at them with no one else to count on but their fellow crew members and their starship, the USS Voyager. Thanks for watching. Please hit like, hit subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. Thank you very much to those of you who already are. Please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/toygalaxy. Several different tiers to address your specific Secret Galaxy content needs. Check out the Secret Galaxy merch shop at secretgalaxy.shop. All merchandise is physically in stock and ready to ship. Links to all of this in the description below. And let us know in the comments down below if you also have white lady actor blindness. Working on this video, I was reminded that when Kate Mulgrew was announced as Captain Janeway, I remember thinking, they cast the lady from Kate and Allie as a Star Trek captain. That's interesting. And I was right. That would have been interesting if that's what actually happened. Obviously, from here in the future, with the internet in my hands and the value of hindsight, I know that the lady on Kate and Allie that I was thinking of was Jane Curtin, and that there is no way a reasonable person would confuse those two actresses. The first step is admitting you have a problem.